Hello, everyone. Biogen's webinar, The Role of Interferon Gamma Release Assays in Modern Latent Tuberculosis Testing Programs. Today we'll hear from 4 presenters. Travis Fearhockey, manager of the clinical laboratory at Park Nicollet Methodist Hospital Laboratory in Minneapolis. Jason Mayer, director of lab services at Park Nicollet Health Partners. Steve Hoover, vice president of laboratory operations at Mako Medical in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Kristen Harding, laboratory supervisor from Mako Medical. My name is Lori Bonner, and I am the chief editor of Clinical Lab Products magazine, now in our 50th year of publication, and I am your host for today's event. Before we begin the presentation, could you please find the question box on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar panel and let me know whether the audio is working and that you can hear me clearly. You can just type in hi or hello. You can also use this question box to submit your questions and comments throughout the webinar, and our presenters will answer these at the end of their presentation. If you experience any connection issues, such as you can't see the slides or can't hear anything, please type in the questions box. Okay, so before we get started, we'd like to ask you, what is your current preferred method of TB testing? You should see a pop-up box with a multiple choice question. Please choose your selection now. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds to answer the poll. I see a lot of people are still voting. The percentage is climbing very rapidly. And here we go. It looks like quite a lot of you are already using QuantiFeron Plus in your own institution, almost 50%. So we'll move on. Next up, we'll hear from Steve Hoover and Kristen Harding from Mako Medical. I'm sorry. First up, we'll have Jason Mayer and Travis Fearhockey from Park Nicollet. Jason and Travis, if you could go ahead.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to all of us for joining us to hear our story. I'm Jason Mayer. I'm the Director of Laboratories for Park Nicollet Health System. We are the largest laboratory division within Health Partners within the Twin Cities metro area. And so along with me today is Travis Fearhockey, who is the manager for our clinical laboratory at Methodist Hospital, as well as Jim Bilkey, who is sitting with me in the room today, who is Park Nicollet's chemistry technical specialist. Next slide. And today I will be giving you an overview of the Health Partners system to help give you an understanding of why implementation of the automated IGRA testing was so important for us. And Travis will be discussing our experience related to the implementation, centralization, automation of the QuantiFeron Gold test on our DSR and Liaison XL. Next slide. So to give you a quick overview of Health Partners, we were founded in 1957 as a cooperative and are a large integrated healthcare organization providing healthcare services in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, central Minnesota, and western Wisconsin. And we also provide health plan financing and administration across the Midwest region through our health plan. We are the largest consumer-governed nonprofit healthcare organization in the nation. We serve more than 1.8 million medical and dental health plan members through our health plan and over 1.2 million patients in our care delivery system. Park Nicollet Health Services, who I work for, joined Health Partners through a merger in 2013, allowing the care delivery to span the Twin Cities market. And just to give you a geographical reference, Health Partners was traditionally based on the North and East Twin Cities metro, with its basis in the St. Paul market, and Park Nicollet was traditionally West and South Metro based with its basis in the Minneapolis market. So it was a very logical merger at the time, as the cultures were also very similar between the two organizations. So now the Health Partners Care Group system includes a multi-specialty group practice of more than 1,800 physicians and advanced practice practitioners. Next slide. Our laboratories within the system produce over 10 million tests annually, while supporting 9 hospitals, which includes 4 critical access hospitals, 3 mid-size hospitals, and 2 large urban referral centers, including a level 1 trauma center. Over 60 physician office laboratories through our primary and specialty care clinic labs. We have over 180 outreach clients through our Pathway Medical Laboratories outreach services. We have virtual-based services through our health plans, Virtuell, and we also provide support for 3 laboratory support for 3 professional sports teams in the market. We do all of this with on-site testing in most of our facilities, and by utilizing 3 main reference hubs within the Twin Cities market, centralizing testing as needed to these hubs and decentralizing as necessary to the on-site laboratories in the clinics or hospitals. One of the 3 hubs that we utilize is Methodist Hospital. And our system has decided to perform QuantiFeron Gold testing for the Health Partners system at Methodist to allow us to centralize and standardize not only for our system, but for all of our outreach clients and other employer groups as well. Next slide. Just want to take a quick minute and help you understand how the health plan plays a role in our care delivery and some of these decisions that we make. As Health Partners is a major insurance plan in the market and in the region, with patients seen in most provider organizations, it gives us some insight into the care delivery and total cost of care by utilizing blinded administrative claims data. So we have the ability to compare costs and resource utilization for similar patient diagnoses across providers through an indexing to a market median. Health Partners has outperformed Minnesota regional and national risk-adjusted cost of care benchmarks now for 4 straight years. And so as we talk, next slide, as we talk about total cost of care, it's a method that many of you know is used to measure healthcare affordability. Health Partners is a leader and committed to achieving the Institute of Healthcare Improvement's triple aim of improving the health of the population we serve, improving the experience of each individual within our care delivery system, and improving the affordability of our patients, laboratory clients, and members. TCOC is designed to support affordability initiatives, to identify instances of overuse and inefficiency, and to highlight cost savings opportunities. As you're going to hear from Travis in a little bit, QuantiFeron Gold testing and the manual decentralized aspects that we had previously in our system really fit this mold as a potential area for improvement. Next slide. And again, this TCOC process drives many of our improvement processes across Health Partners. It brings high quality testing to the most efficient and timely manner possible. And to do this, we must interact with our clinicians. And this is a key point of this, is that we interact with our clinicians in multiple ways. We have laboratory total cost of care work groups, system-wide groups looking for opportunities to improve the triple aim, such as our physician-led groups that include primary care, urgent care, pediatrics, specialty clinician champions. We again look through recent topics such as A1C testing, vitamin testing, screening in general for any screening test, influenza testing, COVID testing will be on that list shortly, but just making sure that we're doing the right test at the right time. And so these groups really allow us to look at the appropriateness, both either decreasing or increasing utilization, making sure we're using evidence-based testing and methods, and trying to be as efficient as possible, while still bringing as much value as we can to the system. Sometimes this is through centralization or decentralization if necessary, standardization and removing variations in care between our parts of our organization, and of course automation so that we can utilize our most valuable resources, our team members, and make sure that they're doing work that is value added. And so, As we worked with our clinician partners on the best way for us to provide TB testing, QuantiFeron Gold testing and the manual decentralized aspects of our system really fit the mold as a potential area for improvement for us. And so we utilized basically this graph on how we could get to that point. Travis will now bring us through our improvement processes and our implementation of the QuantiFeron Gold test on our DSOR and Liaison XL. Next slide.
Next slide. Thank you, Jason. So as a large health system, integrated health system, the days of making independent decisions, replacing like for like, are past us and behind us at this point, as we really work to identify what is the best testing model for our health system, our patients, and our laboratories. And to do this, there's a few things that we look at which may seem familiar to many of you. Through that evaluation, we look at turnaround time requirements. Does the testing require to be performed stat? Does a centralized or decentralized model fit? Evaluation of current testing platforms. Do we have an analyzer or platform that can already support centralized volumes? Is the current methodology or the direction that we would like to go, or will we be seeking a new methodology or testing model? Transportation logistics. Are there courier routes developed to support testing needs, or do we need to add couriers? Do we have the supplies to move the testing throughout the health system? Evaluation of our staffing model. Is this something that if we can do a centralized model, are we able to do it without adding FTE, or will we need to adjust how we are moving people throughout the system? An operational cost decrease. So an overall operational cost assessment to ensure cost decrease. If we aren't able to decrease costs through operations, is there something that from a total cost of care that we can decrease for our patients? So with reduced visits, right care, right time, lower readmission rates, and then as always, our quality does not suffer. Next slide. Our previous testing model, so just to give you a little background of where we were. So previously we had testing performed on 2 different platforms at 2 different laboratories. One of our laboratories was using a Dynex DSX. The other one was using a Bio-Rad Bolus. It was run Monday through Friday and with a low throughput and long run times, as many of you are aware of the ELISA methodology. With both platforms being performed, we were able to do about 198 tests or patients per day, with a combined volume of about 24,000 patients per year. As you can imagine, this is slow, putsy, and was a large demand on our teams. Our LAS test was the same, but it was not created the same in the sense of that we had different methods for calculations and interpretations. One of our locations was utilizing rules within the LAS for interpretations, while the other one was using a bridge or a third-party software on the analyzer. Also, we only had one analyzer that was interfaced. As many of you are probably cringing on the phone, as you are well aware of the manual entry aspects that would be required for this, and us being susceptible to transcription errors. Next slide. Through the implementation process, we were able to kind of standardize our LAS-generated calculations and interpretations. This change aligns with how we build calculations and interpretations for most other tests within our system. One of the largest challenges we had with this is developing or building the calculations of the interpretations to Fire and Beaker. Our LAS team needed to consult with other laboratories to help decide how we would build this. Through those discussions and consultations, they were able to decide to build the calculations into the nil result. Through this, they had to make the decision to do 4 different order numbers for each tube. So it would be 1 test for the clinician with 4 orders, for 1 for each tube. We're also able to implement auto-verification. So going from an interface test to auto-verification was a large win for our techs, especially as they were now bringing on a large volume into one location. In order to make the auto-verification to work as expected, a manual process did need to be put into place. We needed to make sure that the nil result was the last of the 4 to cross the interface. In order to do this, our techs need to do the manual step of making sure that the nil tube is the last in the rack of the set of 4. We were able to have a minimized training plan. And why we were able to have a minimized training plan is that we had many techs already used to using the Liaison QuantiFeron assay. So much of this was familiar to them. We have also had a DSORN platform within our lab for the last 10 years. So training to the technology and to the analyzer were limited, which made it an ease of transition for our teams. This has allowed us to really reduce our training plan with us already having key operators for the test and allowed them to focus on adjusting to new workflows, managing higher volume, transitioning from batch testing to modified random access. And I say modified random access because there is still some limitation to the incubation required, which there is some degree of batching that needs to occur. We had minimal changes occur to our patient reports since we were already performing QuantiFeron-TB Gold Plus. Our clinical teams were already used to the test, and the order really remained the same for us. We had 1 order, 4 results, 4 quantitative results with 1 interpretation. Our biggest learning, which is something that has been learned through doing the QuantiFeron Gold test in general, is that the collection is still the most important part. We continue to work with our collectors and our collecting teams through education, making sure that we aren't having short tubes or that we have them shaking them well enough. We can continue to see about a cancellation rate of about 1%, but this continues to be the focus for our improvements. Next slide. Like previously stated in the last slide, our improvements observed were interfacing and auto verification. With us not having an interface at one of our sites, this was one of the biggest ones for our teams. We're able to utilize capacity in our current DSORN Liaison XLs. We had a single process for all IGRA testing within our system. All QFT specimens came to a single location to be incubated, processed, and ran by a single tech for the system. We have seen some improvements through our turnaround time, as it's about 12 to 24 hours, and that's kind of based on when the collection occurs. We did see some FTE savings as we have freed up FTE at one of our locations and have managed the workload with our current FTE at the other site. This concludes our presentation, and we'll wait on the line for questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay. If you have any questions for Jason and Travis, please type them into the question box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Before we go on, we'd like to ask a second polling question. We'd like all attendants to please respond to what is the frequency of TB testing per week? Okay, and here's our response. It looks like 53% of us are using this only 0 to 10 times per week. Next up, we will hear from Steve Hoover and Kristen Harding from Mako Medical. Kristen and Steve?
Hi, we're here.
Hey, my name is Steve Hoover. I oversee all the operations for Mako Medical. If you want to go to the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background on Mako as a whole, we're a privately owned reference lab that was founded in 2014. Our main goal was to disrupt the market from a lot of the other reference labs that were in place. And we really had 4 main goals through that. Was always to maintain quality. We always want to have ease of use and decreased turnaround time, accessibility, and we always wanted our clients to have that VIP experience. And I think over the years, we've kind of let those qualities shine through. The map kind of shows our footprint, and COVID has expanded that footprint across 28 different states currently. but those are the main focuses that we have for blood currently. You know, for our choice of the TB QuantiFeron test that we went with diasorin and QIAGEN, we felt that assay met all of those needs, especially decreased turnaround time, quality, and the VIP experience piece. And the accessibility really couldn't be matched. But to kind of go into that a little more in depth, I'll turn it over to Kristen Harding, who's our supervisor over esoteric testing, and she can kind of go through the steps that we go through at Mako on a daily basis to make sure this testing is efficient and meets our clients' needs.
Next slide. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Harding. I am the esoteric supervisor here at Mako Medical. And today I will be discussing and looking at the two platforms that we did use or are using. We were using the DSX Analyzer, and now we are using the DiaSorin Liaison XL. We will also look at why we changed our platform to the Liaison XL. I also will just be discussing why QuantiFeron testing is a better process on this analyzer, also how to interpret your results, our collection process and supplies that are needed, and I'll also talk about how Mako's QuantiFeron workflow works. Next slide, please. The testing platform. So we were using the Dynex DSX Analyzer, and as you can see, we are open actually 7 days a week now, but we were only running the test 3 days a week. So we were running it on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We were only running it on first shift. We had one analyzer, and we were getting an average of about 37 patients a week. And it was taking a total per year of 407 labor hours, because this was a very time-sensitive test using the DSX Analyzer, and also the test took 4 hours in order to get a result. So if your one assay failed, like if it was your QC would fail, you'd have to repeat that run, which means you'd have wasted 4 hours. So you'd have to go back and rerun that and then wait another 4 hours just to get your results. But with the DiaSorin Liaison XL, we can run this 7 days a week. We can run it on any shift. We currently only run it on first shift. We do have one instrument that we run it on, but we have 5 total. So if I needed to, I could move it to another analyzer. But we do have one that we just run the QuantiFerons on. We get an average probably about 50 a week. I know my slide says 35, but it's definitely increased. It just depends on the day. So also, if you look at the labor hours, we only would spend about 16 hours a year of labor hours, because you can load the analyzer and you can walk away and come back in 45 minutes and you'll have your testing results. Next slide, please. So Mako moved the testing platform from the DSS to the DiaSorin Liaison XL for QuantiFeron. And why did we do that? Well, we did that to save on time for testing from start to finish. We went from waiting 4 hours for results to 45 minutes. We saved time with the technologist needed to spend with test preparation. When we had it on the DXS, you had to stick around, come back in about 2 hours and add some more conjugate to the analyzer, where now we just load the analyzer with everything it needs before we run our patients, and in 45 minutes we get a result. We have less room for errors because the DiaSorin Liaison Analyzer automatically sends the results to our LIS. We have a fantastic technical support with DiaSorin Liaison XL. I can call anytime if someone's going to answer, and if I don't get a tech support person right away, they're going to take a message and they will call us back. We didn't have that with the DXS Analyzer. The algorithm for the Liaison QuantiFeron-TB Gold Plus works very well with our LIS system, and it's easy for clients to interpret their results. So the amount of blood that is needed to do the testing is only 210 microliters, and that is for each tube, and there are 4 tubes that are submitted for this testing. Next slide, please. So why do we do testing for QuantiFeron technology? Well, we do it to check for exposure to TB antigen, which cause lymphocytes, specifically CD4 and CD8 T cells, which produce interferon gamma production. And how accurate is this test? This test is 97% accurate. Next slide, please. Why is this test process better than the skin test? Well, most of you on this line have probably had a TB skin test, had to make an appointment, go to the physician, have the tuberculin injected under your skin on your forearm, then have to come back in 3 days and have that measured and read. And you know, if you don't come back in those 3 days, you have to have that whole process repeated. But with this new test that's run on the Liaison, you can come for one visit, have one tube of blood taken, and then your results will be released within 24 to 48 hours. Next slide. So how do you interpret your results? There are 3 possible outcomes. They could be positive, negative, or indeterminate. Usually indeterminate means something has happened either prior to the testing, it didn't incubate long enough, or if it truly is indeterminate, I would repeat the testing. And if you still got indeterminate, I would ask for a recollection. Next slide, please. So the collection process. The blood tubes should be at room temperature prior to the time of collection. All 4 tubes are required for a single test. Each tube is designed to draw only in 1 ml. So here at Mako, we have our clients draw a lithium heparin green top tube, and then they send that blood in. And when that blood comes into the lab, we pipette off 1 ml into each of the 4 tubes for the QuantiFeron. And we mix it vigorously to make sure that all the cells are coated. We label the tubes appropriately, and then we put it into the incubator. We do not centrifuge or refrigerate the specimens. We put them into the incubator for the 16 hours. Next slide, please. So the tubes that are needed will be the gray, the green, the yellow, and the purple top tubes, and each one plays a vital role in the calculation for the TB exposure. Next slide. So I took a picture of what proper filled tubes look like versus tubes that aren't filled properly. So if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you will notice the green, the gray, the green, the yellow, and the purple tubes are filled. But if you look toward the bottom, you will see that the yellow and the purple top tubes are not filled correctly. They are very minimal amount of plasma in there for testing. This will probably cause your analyzer not able to complete the testing, and you may have to pipette that off and put it into an aliquot tube and rerun it. But if you don't have enough, you will not get results, because you have to have results for all 4 tubes in order to get your final results for the physician. So if you look on the right-hand side, you will notice that they are all filled correctly and ready to be ran. Next slide, please. Incubation time. Tubes must be put in the incubator prior to testing, or the results will not be accurate. Tubes that are not incubated for at least 16 hours will not be given the time for the T cells to activate. And when this happens, you will get indeterminate results, and then your patients will have to be retested, redrawn and retested. The reason why the blood will need to be recollected is because the specimen needs to incubate to activate those T cells. All specimens are incubated as whole blood. After 16 hours, the samples are centrifuged at 10 minutes for 3,500 RPM, and then the plasma will be analyzed. Re-incubating once the tubes have been centrifuged will not work, so this step must be done. Next slide. Liaison QuantiFeron-TB Gold Plus workflow for Mako. So here at Mako, we have our patient's blood drawn with the lithium heparin tube. We send them at room temperature to Mako laboratory. Specimens are received and pipetted off into the 4 QuantiFeron Plus tubes. Specimens are incubated for 16 hours. After incubation, the tubes are removed from the incubator and centrifuged for 3,500 RPM for 10 minutes to separate the plasma from the whole blood. Samples are tested on the Interferon Liaison XL. Results come off in 45 minutes. Final reports are approved by the laboratory team members, and the physician will have the final report. Next slide. That completes my presentation.
Okay. Thank you all. We have a few questions so far. We have the first question for Travis and Jason. Are you managing the TB testing at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic? How are you managing the TB testing at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic?
This is Travis. So how we're managing it is we haven't really managed it any differently than before the pandemic. I think the biggest impact for us as an organization, we had services and elective surgeries, things like that, within our state shutdown, and then within our organization, we saw our volumes decrease. So because of our volumes decreasing, it did actually move this change up quicker than we had originally planned. So that's been the biggest change for our organization. It did accelerate the centralization of this testing to one site. But really, we're not testing our patients any differently, or those employee health patients that are going through screening as well.
Okay. There's a follow-up question for you. Are you doing single tube draw?
We are not. So at this time, we don't have an aliquotter. It is something that we've been evaluating, but we're still trying to find that perfect aliquotter to help us with labeling and so on.
Anybody else, any other attendees? If you have questions, please send them through the comment box in your GoToWebinar panel. Here's one additional question. For the people at Mako, how has the adoption of an automated platform impacted your overall workflow?
This is Steve. I think the biggest impact for us has obviously been on the turnaround time itself, and we've eliminated the batch testing. We really had specialized technologists that were running the DSX before. It was more labor intensive. This has really simplified everything in the lab for us. So the turnaround time has just been phenomenal.
Okay. Here's another question. It's not directed for anybody, so anybody who wants to jump in. How long can the specimen stay in the lithium heparin tube at room temperature?
Up to 12 hours from the time the blood is drawn to the time that it needs to be incubated, working on extending that time before the year is over, but we'll keep everyone updated.
Okay. Can the tubes incubate longer than 16 hours? If not, what time do you start the incubation?
This is Kristen from Mako. We take the tubes out after 16 hours, and then we can we place them in the refrigerator until it's time for testing.
Okay. Here's a question. How do you ensure the correct patient label for each tube is applied to the correct tube, that is TB1, TB2, NIL, mitogen, in order to take advantage of the calculation software and get correct results?
So this is Kristen from Mako. We were able to put, since there's 4 tubes, so for each tube we have A, B, C, and D, and we attach that to the same accession number for each tube has the same accession number, but we added that A, B, C, or D to the tube, so we can put those tubes in any order on the analyzer, and it knows that it's with that group of tubes. So we were able to incorporate that with our LIS.
Okay. Next question, do you need a middleware in order to interface with your computer LIS?
This is Travis. I think it's a function of Beaker. We use Epic Beaker, and we have a middleware software for our interfaces. That's Data Innovations, but it's not required from my understanding, from a DSORN Liaison XL to LIS to have a middleware.
Okay. Next question for Mako. Has Mako validated keeping the lithium heparin tube at room temperature for up to 14 hours? According to QIAGEN, tubes must be refrigerated after 3 hours at room temp. What is the average indeterminate rate that Mako sees per month?
This is Kristen from Mako. No, I have not performed a validation on that. And what was the other question, part of that question?
What is the average indeterminate rate that Mako sees per month?
Per month. I would say, well, I haven't seen any lately, but in the beginning when I started running them, I saw about 2 or 3, and then I would repeat them. And then if I got the same indeterminate results, I would ask the client to recollect.
Okay.
And it's just, this is Jason for at Health Partners, we're seeing about a 1 to 2% indeterminate rate.
Okay.
Hey, Lori, this is Neil from QIAGEN. Just a minor correction on the workflow. So the tube doesn't have to be left at room temperature for 3 hours. It can be left at room temperature for up to 3 hours, but it can be refrigerated immediately after blood collection if that is the workflow of choice. So when it gets drawn from the customer and it gets put in the single lithium heparin tube, it can go directly into refrigeration, 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. But you have up to 3 hours of room temperature time in order to make that decision. So you can either put it in refrigeration up until then, or you can just leave it at room temperature for up to 12 hours.
Okay. For indeterminate results, is the problem mainly with specimen collection that needed repeat testing?
This is Kristen from Mako. That is the only problem I have seen. If they are not filled correctly, that's when I get indeterminate results. I haven't had any other than the tubes not being filled correctly.
Okay. For Mako,
The other thing that we,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
this is Travis with Health Partners. The other thing we see is if the tubes aren't mixed well enough or shaken well enough, we'll get indeterminates from that as well.
Okay.
But it does come from collection.
Okay, for Mako, what are you using to aliquot from the single tube to the 4 tubes?
We use a 1 ml pipette.
Okay. Any suggestions for reducing indeterminate results from dialysis patients?
I'm sorry, but when we receive the patients, we don't know what their history is. In a reference lab, we get so many at one time, we don't have the opportunity to stop and look at every patient.
Okay. How do you determine rejection quality?
For rejection, if we don't receive enough specimens to fill the 4 tubes, so they definitely have to have 4 ml of blood in the lithium heparin tubes in order for the test to work.
Okay. One more question. Why did you choose to collect in a single hep tube versus direct collection in the 4 QFT tubes?
We decided to use that for client use and easy use for them.
Okay. Did the number of...
That's actually the reason that we're looking at Health Partners as well, to potentially adopting that. It's just ease of collection, and if there's ways that we can help reduce some collection issues.
Okay. Did the number of indeterminates change when you went from ELISA to Liaison?
Well,
I don't have the...
Oh,
okay,
go ahead.
go ahead.
At Health Partners, our indeterminates have gone down from about 2 to 3% to 1 to 2%. So we have seen a reduction.
Okay.
Here at Mako, we have also seen a reduction in the amount of indeterminate.
Okay. Here's a question for Mako. Do you batch tubes when you place in the incubator so they are all removed at the same time, or do you place tubes in the incubator whenever they arrive, which means they would need to be removed every few minutes?
No, we actually batch them into when they arrive so that we know when to take them out.
Okay. That one question was already asked. The question for both, if for HIL, is anyone measuring for interference rejection?
No, at Health Partners, we are not.
Okay. For Mako, how do you shake the 4 tubes on a large scale? Can you vortex on a multi-vortexer?
Oh, no, we don't do that. When it comes in and we pipette them off into the 4 tubes, they manually get shaken up and down for 10 times. We
Okay.
don't put them on a shaker.
And what is the range of incubation time?
Incubation time is for 16 hours.
Okay. How consistent are the results between TB1 and TB2 antigens?
I'm not clear how to answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we don't have much on that either.
Okay. Last question so far. How did you get budgeting for the aliquotter? Was there pushback from administration? How did you get the aliquotter approved?
This is Mako again. We don't have an aliquotter. We just manually pipette off the blood into the tube. We don't need an aliquotter because we don't get that many in one night. The most I receive in one evening would probably be about 15.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is actually the reason we have not switched to a single tube at this point, is because we do not want to go down that road until we can get some sort of aliquoting support for our team. And right now, capital is a little more difficult to obtain. So we have not received any approvals for an aliquotter.
Okay.
And the other
Okay,
piece to an aliquotter is we want to make sure that we're getting a system that actually has the ability to positively specimen ID aliquots to the primary tubes as well,
Okay.
which adds a level of complexity to them.
Okay. That appears to be the last question we have so far. Thanks so much to our speakers for presenting, and thank you to all the attendees. We hope that you enjoyed the webinar. Recording of this webinar will be available within a few days on the CLP website. Thanks very much and have a good day.